Hi everyone and welcome back to SwitchUp. My name's Mark Walker and I'm really pretty excited to talk to you today about the game Fae Farm. Now we had the opportunity to experience some early as well as late gameplay on the Nintendo Switch version so that we could bring you this video that is going to go over absolutely everything about the game. It may also answer some of your queries as to whether this will live up to the hype of legendary titles like Stardew Valley. In a world filled with supposedly cozy games, I think Fae Farm says hold my pumpkin juice. Why? Well, let's find out. Before you do anything else, you'll be customizing your character. There's a reasonably robust system allowing you to choose the skin color, the body type, and then give them a fitting name. Something that really epitomizes the legendary status of its user. Like in this case, for example, we called it user. Fae Farm will feature lots of different customization options. Many of those will be unlocked through the quest system, which we'll talk about later in the video, but there are also certain festivals where specific items of clothing can be worn, and others still which are available at shops. The narrative centers around a user who stumbles across a note in a bottle on a beach. As you do, they read the note and it invites them to a mysterious island called Azoria. Sacking off their day job, they hop in a boat and just head out. These people. Unfortunately, on the way they get shipwrecked, but there's a magical quality to that, and they find themselves on the glorious shores of Azoria. With all this faffing out the way, you head straight to your new apartment complex, a slightly dishevelled looking farm. The mayor greets you and basically tells you to get on tidying things up. One of the first things I noticed was the reasonably fluid movement system. Now I say that because so many farming games have this kind of clunky movement that's very limited in terms of where you can go. Fae Farm lets the player jump, dive into water, swim around, and generally go where you can see, which is quite a nice little addition. On your farm, you'll find a mailbox, of course, and in it a letter from the mayor, and that's where things kick off. Now, to help you navigate, you'll be using a large map. This will show every key character, as well as any locations that you've previously visited. There is a fast travel system where you unlock way shrines and then you can fast travel between those. But otherwise, you can set waypoints, either for your current quest or just a location that you want to attend, and follow a pretty handy on-screen indicator. Now, what exactly are you going to be doing in Fae Farm? Well, aside from cleaning up your farm, you'll obviously be planting various types of crops for the purpose of making a decent bit of bunts. That's money to the rest of the world. And to do that, you basically have a farm store that's situated in the market to begin with, and you can place absolutely anything in there and it will give you an indication as to how much it's going to sell for. And then later into the game, you can build a stall which is used to sell things directly from your farm. So again, very familiar and very similar to something like Stardew Valley. But as we'll see, there are lots of differences here and systems that go quite a bit further. Dotted around the landscape, hidden in corners, behind rocks, up trees, you'll find various recipes. These will unlock items for lots of different places, such as your house, and that's where I want to talk about your house and a system that is possibly one of the most awesome things I've heard in a while. Now, the house customization has a grid system, which is pretty straightforward, but get this right, based on what you put in it, it grants it a coziness rating, and that coziness rating is made up of comfort, relaxation, and inspiration. Basically, the recipes that you discover, the things that you craft, have one of those attributes that then boosts this rating and essentially gives your house like a level, and it will affect the rate at which you regain your attributes. Now, they're shown in the top corner. You've got your health, your stamina, and your magic. And health and stamina, they're pretty straightforward. They're as you'd expect, using stamina to do certain things in the world. But the magic is heavily linked to a combat system, and we'll go into combat when we get onto the more advanced aspects of the game, which will come near the end, looking at things like dungeons. But obviously, there are timestamps for everything at the top of the screen. Now, it's not only your home that you'll be customizing. There are other buildings, things like barns, and several stations that you can put within them. In your house, for example, you can have a drink station, a place to cook your food, things to mitigate stamina loss, the usual, with further ones unlocking as you progress. Of course, in these types of games, you'll be wanting to rename absolutely everything from your own player to the name of your farm, all of the little animals, and yeah, everything in between really. So after initially having set up your farm, hopefully gone a bit further and built up your crops, you'll carry out some quests for the various people in the world. They'll range from the usual collect this, go fishing, find me a squid, gather up 47 pine nuts, you know the drill. real. I mean, I might have made up a couple of those. But the fishing system will, again, feel quite familiar. You cast off your rod in whichever direction you want, and then you can kind of wiggle it to draw the attention of the fish before you have that back and forth battle, allowing it to relax and then reeling it in. From what I've seen so far of the planting mechanics, this is one area where it can sometimes feel a little bit fiddly. You're trying to position your character in such a way that you highlight the currently active square, and maybe there's a tiny bit of work they could do here. I'm not saying it's any worse than something like Stardew Valley, but I do feel like it's something that can be refined a touch. To facilitate everything you do in the game, you'll have a number of tools which the mayor will basically dish out to you, and each of those has 7 different levels of progression. You'll be able to upgrade them with things like copper, silver to gradually improve those, and those reinforcements will then in turn mean the gathering of more advanced components. Now, aside from fishing, you can also catch bugs. This almost feels like a little mini game where you're stealthily creeping around, but I don't think the stealth mechanics are too in-depth. I didn't notice the bugs launching away too much. And then I think this is a good time to start to look at the more advanced things. With these farming games, you can very often get to a point where you've built up your farm, you're selling crops, happy days, but you're like, well, what comes next? What's the point? And so far from what I've seen, Fae Farm offers a lot of point. Firstly, we have more advanced farming elements, things like the animals. Now, once you've stuck them in a barn and given them all names, the animal handling will actually have you catering to their needs, feeding them, grooming them, but also providing fresh air. You can ring this little bell on the outside and all the animals will come storming out. And it has a real Tamagotchi feeling to each animal, which is a nice little touch. Going beyond that, there's also some form of animal breeding. So you might be able to breed different types to create new ones. It's something that we'll have to go into a little more detail in the full review. A huge area that many of you will be interested in are the relationships. Now, relationships operate in a similar way to, again, Stardew. You can build these up by carrying out quests, engaging with the community, and there's a log that tracks absolutely every relationship in the game. But interestingly, it looks like there's an option to reset those so you can scratch all your current progress and go back to square one with them. If only it was so easy in life. But relationships are confirmed romances, if that's your thing. So the Lothario of the local town has quite clearly arrived. Let's jump over to combat as well as dungeons. Now, there are a number of dungeons which are accessible in the game, and this gives you your first introduction to the combat system. It's a magic-based system using different wands, and you'll also have specific skills that you can use. These have a cooldown attached to them, and spelunking through the dungeons, you'll find them made up of several different floors, which you can fast travel between. With the further you go, the more challenging the enemies become. Combat does seem to be tied to the dungeons though, so you won't be fighting mobs out in the main world, or as far as I saw in the preview. It's pretty straightforward. Again, something we didn't see is whether or not at the end of those dungeons there's a boss fight of some sort, but I did notice one specific station on our farm that was for seal crafting that's basically using ingredients to unlock the seals within dungeons to progress. Visually, Fae Farm looks to be running at 30 frames per second, and joy of joys, so far it does seem to maintain that. Another important aspect, especially for this type of game, are the load times. Loading in and out of your house doesn't take too long at all, around 5 to 7 seconds. The standout thing for me, aside from what I think is quite a nice aesthetic, are the animations. I was saying before about the movement system, but from the combat to the general movement, jumping around, swimming, the animations are quite nice and fluid, and it makes traversal a lot more pleasant. From an audio standpoint, things also look to be handled well. Take a listen to the in-game audio. What really stood out to me were the sound effects. It's something Nintendo do really well, but a lot of indies very often neglect those sound effects, but they end up being the things you hear the most often. So far, they have that quality to them that's quite difficult to put your finger on, but it's kind of Moorish. Now, there's a load of advanced farming stuff that I haven't spoken about. It probably won't mean much to you. Things like advanced potion brewing, the decorations table. There's a system where you can polish up gemstones to sell them for more. There are things like artisan tables to take raw materials and turn them into refined versions, used for other recipes or for selling at a higher price. And then we have multiplayer. Now, I noted that the developer didn't show this in any detail at all, and it remains to be seen how this is going to work, but there is definitely multiplayer in Fae Farm. Whether this will be something along the lines of Animal Crossing, where you can visit other people's farms, or if you just pair up in co-op, that is something that's going to have to wait for the full review. But it's definitely in here. So yeah, let me know how you feel about Fae Farm. Are you looking forward to jumping into this world, getting a load of gold floorings, building up a ton of relationships, and sinking innumerable hours into another of these types of games that just seem to hit the spot for so many people? It is one we'll definitely have a full review of, and if you do have any questions, let me know down in the comments. If I'm not down there, which I will be, I'm sure the developers might pop into the comments as well. That would be cool, and be able to answer some of your different questions. A thanks to those guys for showing us the game nice and early, and to all of you that enjoy this content. If you enjoy it, stick around. Remember, you can save yourself at the moment 10% for the month of June on any of your eShop credit. Head to switchup.gg, use code SwitchUp, you'll get an instant 5% back as well as 5% off. Happy days. For all things Switch, all the time, keep it Switch Up. Cheers guys, see ya!